Welcome to this brand new season of We Are Carbon. I'm Helen Fisher and I'm really excited about this one because I'm now bringing together more of the vision that I was inspired with right back when I began this podcast. We're still an interview show and we'll be having new insightful conversations with our wonderful guests, focusing on our themes of regeneration that continue to build out and explore our starting concept. The concept that we can learn to thrive, not just stumble along or survive through these chaotic problems of our time, but that we can truly thrive and live abundantly as a society when we shift our mindset and turn to nature as our teacher, as our healer, and as something that we are, in fact, a part of. By understanding that we are nature, and therefore our society must support the regeneration of nature in order to create those thriving lives for ourselves. Now, you might be listening because you're in search of inspiration, a glimmer of hope that there is a path forward that can take us to better times. Maybe your concerns are for the climate or our biodiversity crisis. Or perhaps you're worried about the failing health of ourselves or the stability of all these systems around us. To my mind, they're entirely connected, and so our discussions may dip into any or all of those. The big difference with this season is its structure and added formats. After the long list of conversations that I've now had with people on a range of topics and experiences all across the world, this seemingly boundless focus is becoming refined in my mind. So I'm breaking it into categories to make the information more digestible and actionable for any of us who would like to take steps towards creating this more regenerative future. There's fresh voices on each topic, and maybe, more importantly, an opportunity for you to voice your questions, experiences, or ideas. There's also new video formats to make the content easier to consume and share as well, including animations that you can download and share for free on your own social media channels to build more engagement with more people on these subjects. We're becoming more symbiotic. I'd urge you to check the description for further details so that I don't need to keep waffling on here, and please do consider supporting this work in one of the ways so we can keep making it possible. Our first topic is soil. It just makes the most obvious starting point, and I am so delighted that today's conversation is with Claire Mackenzie, producer of the documentary 6 Inches of Soil. She shares insights from the production, which is just now going live, and helps us to understand the real significance of this subject. I'll let Claire introduce herself. I hope you enjoy.
So I'm Claire Mackenzie. I am the producer on the documentary, which is about to go live at the start of 2024. We've been working on this project for the last 3 years, but prior to all of that, the reason I've done it is because I'm a passionate environmentalist. At the heart of what drives me probably now, I've always been driven since university, but now particularly being a mum, it really concerns me. It makes me anxious that I can't just watch it happen. So I like to work with projects that are looking at probably some hopeful, positive solutions, or at least ways of coping with living in this ever-changing climate. So I studied politics at university, and that kind of kickstarted my endless interest into this, and particular interest I've always had is food provenance. And that probably comes from a background of having a grandpa who was a farmer, and my mum, we just always grew stuff and discussed food, I suppose. I've done a lot of local community projects, whether it's starting a food box scheme in London, but it's always just been at the centre of that. Alongside it, I worked for a while, which has related to this in TV production. and that's obviously helped me with the film. And then I've done a lot of work with NGOs and charities, from working in Chile with an indigenous charity to working in Britain with various different causes. At the centre of it all is probably my organising, facilitating and networking head and getting things started and going. And I've got quite a big imagination, so that probably helps. But it's all about people for me, and it's bringing them together, and it's sharing beautiful stories, and that's where we've got to with making this film.
Yeah, that's very inspiring. It's very beautiful how you've tied all of these different aspects of your skills and your passions together, and you've brought them now onto this focus that's more honed in on soil. And I heard about the film, I think, a couple of years ago, so maybe a year into your journey, and it was starting to be promoted and having a few kind of words here and there. And I knew immediately that it's got such a significant message, this 6 inches of soil focusing right there. Do you have a sense of what inspired the whole team? Like we've heard about your background here, but why this particular topic was a journey that you took on together?
Yeah, so I think I'll just do a brief into me, because I live in Cambridgeshire. It's on my doorstep is very intensive arable farming, being the breadbasket of Britain, really, in East Anglia. I've never lived like that before. Where I was brought up was hills and sheep. So I wanted to explore what was going on my doorstep. And on that journey, I met Colin, who's the director, because I wanted to make a film about it. So I did the producing on it and the research, and he came in as the filmmaker. So that's how we started. But we were looking at farming closer to nature, and then with that, obviously, the centre of it all is soil. And I've always, worried about what's going into the soil, how it's being treated, what's happening with it, with processing it, farming. And Colin and I, the first time we did it was really this one farm near here in Cambridgeshire, David White. And when we were filming, he was talking about the livestock on his farm, and there were his worms. And we did this piece, and that ignited our deep felt passion. And we also did see Kiss the Ground, the American film, and Feel, and lots of other footage coming out of America, a bit from Australia, but not enough from Britain. I mean, yes, there are people making pieces for organisations, but not really just a story pulling it all together and trying to get probably those outside of the farming and food industries interested. So that's where it started. We saw the importance of it, and then Colin and I have built a team of amazing people who've really come to us because they're as passionate about soil as we are. So,
yeah, fantastic. It seems to be something that people can really find something to pull them into it, because it's such I suppose it's a story of hope, where we have so many problems surrounding us. It can get fairly tiresome and fatiguing to constantly be thinking about why things are going wrong, and to have something that is so in everybody's lives. We can all connect to soil. We might not be able to really resonate with all different technologies that we hear as solutions, but soil, it's there, it's innate within all of us. I think before we go into any more depth, because there's such a beautiful story that you're weaving together through the documentary, it would be wonderful if you could offer us a bit of context for the audience, if some of these things are new to them, to just summarise for us why the way that we farm is so important and so critical to the health of our soils.
It's at the moment, predominantly very much in the Western world, but really throughout the world, you're seeing a lot of extractive chemical farming. This is very man-made, and as we highlight in the film, it's utterly amazing how much food we're producing, and it's been incredible since the Second World War to stop people being hungry, but it's sadly now everyone's looking at it saying, well, what have we done to our soils, and how long have we got left to be able to use them and farm with them? Sadly, now what we're seeing is, obviously the Dust Bowl was a massive thing in America, and that was the 1930s. But now we're sadly seeing, as highlighted in Kiss the Ground and Common Ground and other pieces, and Australia and in Chile and South America, you're seeing that there's more dust emerging now, and people are having to really embrace different ways of farming. So in Britain, it's what we have explored is trying to step back, because some people will say, well, we're not the US. What they're doing doesn't mean anything to us. Our soils are fine. It's a temperate climate. It's fairly resilient. Yes, that is the case. And we mustn't overly claim disruption because it's a different way. But what we have done, and speaking to people, is there's been a lot of compaction. So that's heavy vehicles. Then the tillage, a lot of deep tilling, but we're going deeper and deeper with the ploughs, we're just breaking up. But when you get into the minutiae detail and go into microbial life that's in the soil, it is what we're finding is that with heavy tillage and heavy ploughing, that is being destroyed. On top of that, taking control are diseases or a rise in insects that we feel are pests. We have developed chemicals, etc., to control. So we're all trying to control, and we're doing it alongside big agrochemical companies. And it's all got into this crazy state where we've got, with our control, we've seen more pests arise. So therefore we need to have more chemicals. Not only that, they then need to develop a seed that's then resilient to the chemicals. And so we've got this wild thing, a bit like in our health, is my other passion, holistic health, is it's this awful perpetual cycle. So we're just killing, destroying, trying to feed, trying to control. We can't do that anymore because we're getting sick. So let's just go for the human, things like cancer, long-term illnesses, they are all being sent back to the way we farm, etc. But our soil is sick, and if our soil is sick, we can't farm it anymore. Some people believe we don't need soil, we can just do it in a intensively inside, with aquaponics or aeroponics, so without soil or fermentation, etc. But what soil scientists and other people who are exploring it, namely farmers, is this: there is so much going on in the soil. We have no idea still where we know a tiny amount about the billions of organisms, but it's not just what lives there, it's their relationship. And so if you read anything like Merlin Sheldrake's book, An Entangled World, Entangled Life, you begin to understand the complexities that we're closely related to the fungi in the soil, that relationship that they have with plants. We are only unearthing all of that. Excuse terrible puns that always come out with this subject, but this with all these complexities, people are now beginning to stand back, explore it further, and try and spend time with it. But of course, there's no silver bullet, and it is very complicated. And we do want to take control, and we want to resolve things quickly. But that, as we've shown, by going too quickly from Second World War to where we are now, with our soils sick and ourselves sick, and then obviously hugely importantly the biodiversity crisis, we need to take control now, and sadly we need to look at how we're farming.
Thank you for offering so much information there, because it is a complex and very interconnected, all different themes that are running through it. But you offered a really clear sense that we don't always have to be able to see the damage and to see that the land's turning to a desert right before our eyes, to acknowledge that it can still be sick. It's happening in ways that we can't see because of all of those relationships and that microscopic life, etc. So it would just add to that, I think, to expand and offer additional context. This relationship of this healthy soil. Why is healthy soil important to our future?
Well, aside from hopefully protecting it, to be able to farm and produce food that is what they're doing at the moment. There's a lot of research being done on the nutritional density of food. We hopefully one day will be able to fire a machine at a piece of food and it be able to read it. We have at the moment BRICS testing, which looks at sugar testing, and then there's some other really wonderful things coming, particularly from America over here as well, where they're looking at all of that, but it's still being worked on to produce the right data and scientific exploration. But we know when we eat something, so for example, one of the people in the film, Adrienne, I work with her once a week as well on the farm when I can during the summer when she needs help, because it's in my deep passion. I'd rather be sitting down there than sitting at my desk. But when you taste her vegetables, which are grown without, and she will be organic, but at the moment it's agroecologically grown, planet friendly. And so she has huge diversity. And yes, she does go for some quite diverse crops. So sometimes it's just a slightly different pepper that you haven't had in a supermarket, but the taste and the smell and everything is so, you don't even need to test it to know that it's genuinely, when you feel happier, it must be doing you good. And I would say absolutely. The other thing is obviously the freshness, because if it hasn't traveled so far. But so that is where we're looking at. So the food, but the right to that at the moment is just sitting with those of us that can kind of afford like a middle class thing. But really, what we're trying to say in the film, there should be a right to grow and a right to food of this quality for everybody. Because this, if we go into my holistic health passion, if we're feeding ourselves, we hopefully then don't have to rely on our NHS and health system, which is creaking, because we'd have a healthier community. Because what's happening at the moment, we have dietary issues, and that's maybe eating poor food. But if we are not maximising the nutritional density when it is grown in healthy soil, we're not going to be having those wonderful benefits to try and prevent some of the awful diseases. And then beyond just the eating and the consumption, you want to have healthy soils that are also remaining in fields, remaining on gardens, remaining on the land, not running into our rivers. At the moment, they're running into our rivers, so we're now getting polluted water. There are obviously chemicals within that, and we have a huge issue there, because that's another cyclical issue. So when people say to me, I only really care about the sea, I said, well, that's great. They say, I can't relate to soil. I said, well, it's all one system. There is no separation here. We are talking about the same thing. And obviously on our journey in our film, we've got to be really careful not to go down endless rabbit holes, but we do have a wonderful piece which talks about helping prevent flooding and helping prevent chemicals going into the water with this regenerative and better agroecological farming. So does that answer it? Is there anything else I should be saying? Also, there is that deep innate connection when you are working with good, healthy soil, and they've now seen it, and Tim Spector talks about it, and there's the gut microbiome connection. But when you're touching it, and there's a mind-body connection, and that is genuinely now proven to help people. So people with depression or struggling with life, go outside, get that exposure. But it's not just being outside. Once you start connecting and growing, it just reduces. And you see it in the film, because one of our farmers does struggle with mental health issues, and she generally says it helps her. In fact, two of them actually have been on a bit of a journey, and when they're there and more connected with the soil, it helps them.
Yeah, that is again another absolutely incredible overview, because it threads everything through in this very, very clear sense of we have to think holistically. And there's something about, and this sort of comes up a lot in the discussions that I have, the feeling of the complexity of these systems where we can't just look at one focused detail. We've got to see how it's all tied together. But then there's something that just brings a simplicity to all of that. And you touched on it there, that connection to the soil, that experience of you don't need to know what the nutrition is in that beautiful pepper. You eat it and the experience, it's embedded within the food. There's something there that you can just feel the aliveness of the soil transferring to the food, transferring to the health of the people, and then the health of the planet. And to me, it's complex, but it's also beautifully simple. And the problem with it is you can't explain it to somebody. You want people to experience it. And I think this ties into my next question, which comes down to how do we motivate change? And the film, I think, describes itself along the lines of a story of British farmers standing up against the industrial food system. And to my mind, there's something about motivating those farmers on a very personal level because of their connection and their experience on their journey. Do you feel that it is the farmers that are being left to move things forward in sort of a mass, larger scale transition on the land? And have you got any sense of experience that suggests that they're being supported in that, and how can they receive support in that?
Yeah, it's an amazing thing, and I think you've been to Groundswell, but the event where regenerative farmers gather in Hertfordshire. When I first started exploring this subject for the first film we did in Cambridgeshire, one of the local farmers here, who would call himself a soil-friendly farmer, let's put it that way, he said, "Oh, you need to go to Groundswell." And when you go there, I mean, it's all in the name, you get this sense of farmers. The Cherries who started it did it because they needed to do it. They believed that they needed to bring farmers, and others go to the event, but it's definitely started with farmers. And in fact, I found out it's unique to the world, that event. They don't have one in America. So farmers in America and Australia, or like, Gabe Brown, on the sort of founding fathers, as we call it, of this movement, have definitely led on it, and are definitely now leading on lobbying government. I mean, recently, Guy Singh-Watson, who's the founder of Riverford, I mean, he's just stepped away from Riverford. I mean, he's still connected, but he's not running the business. But he's got to the stage in life where he's like, I have nothing to lose but to stick my neck out and fight for the system. And he's a perfect example of a farmer who is saying, governments, civil servants may understand because you have experts within the civil service, but the people we vote for in our supposed democracy half the time have no idea, have never been anywhere near it. And it's like saying the NHS is ill and our education. These things, they do have the experts behind the scene, but when the decisions are made, they're not made by a farmer or by a doctor. They're made by those people we supposedly vote for. And it's so wrong. So the farmers have said, you're going to take, the subsidies are changing. We've, out of Brexit, you're promising us supposed subsidies to fill that, which are going to encourage us to be more environmentally friendly. And they've got various different names, from SFI and, it's the ELMS and, environmental land management. But it is there's still no clear guidance for them. So the farmers who have looked into their crystal ball, or who have got the capacity to, because this is really complex, and you can't point a finger at farmers and say, you're not doing it, you're a bad farmer. That isn't what we're saying in the film at all. What we're saying is those that are leading on it, whether you've got the Groundswell farmers, or is they've had the capacity, whether that could be financially they're secure enough to make that decision, whether they had the headspace to explore a totally different way of farming, going away from chemical to biological, working with nature. But what's happening is they to get everybody else to transition, they need support. So they need more people on the ground, agronomists. There are a handful of them who really do understand this, but they need more people. And the agronomists, again, they've only been trained at our agricultural colleges to do a certain thing. So they need to retrain. So the farmers are leading on it. There are different people, whether it's the private sector who are putting money into this, and there's new companies starting, and carbon credits, and it's all really, really complex. But at the end of it, you have to look to the farmer to guide people, because they are the ones who know the system, the land, etc. But it is very complex, because each farm, each field, each year is different. And so you need to have different voices, different people from different bits of the country coming together and coming together to lead on it. And that's what you do see at somewhere like Groundswell. And it is amazing, and they are doing it, and they are leading on it. And there are some amazing investment. There's one investment company who actually are putting money into training, and there are a few examples, but one I'm thinking of, where they're actually training farmers, and they brought Gabe Brown over, and they're seemingly doing some incredible things one bit, and then they're sort of investing in another bit in because they believe in regenerative farming, they believe in the soil, and they believe that the private sector should support the farmers. But of course, it can get messy and out of control. So that's why farmers need to be mindful. And yes, they do need to lead on it, and they need to lead together on it so that they are stronger. But the government, who knows? And we're probably going to see a change, and it's depressing. And I think there's no words to say at the moment. There's zero support, and we've just had another change of head of DEFRA, etc. So right now I think it's a huge unknown and really quite depressing. But the Geising Watson's lobbying, NFFN are constantly lobbying, and so let's hope it's an interesting time.
Yes, definitely a very interesting time, and the human side of it, the societal side of it, seems to be at least as complex as the soil on so many levels. And there's something. It's kind of like the scales just sort of keeping themselves balanced out. And on the one hand, there's so many things that are going against the transition. And on the other hand, there are so many wonderful people pushing it forward. And I think that kind of idea of them coming together and supporting one another is a very fruitful feeling. That collaboration between like-minded people bringing different skills to the table, different experiences. So I think there's something very unique about the time that we're in and the need for people to come together. Moving on to talk more specifically about the people in your film, because I find it very interesting that you follow the story of 3 farmers, and then you've got an awful lot of outside expertise that it comes from all the way across the globe in different viewpoints. But these 3 farmers, they're notably very young, and particularly when we talk about farming, it's very known that it's an industry of aging population and the challenge of trying to get new people into the industry, because it's just not really that attractive for people to get into farming these days. Was the choice to go young, do you feel that that's a decision that you made, or do you feel that that's a reflection of the driving force behind regeneration, is that it's able to attract this younger audience and interest?
Yeah, at the beginning we were just trying to decide how to navigate the subject. This is really complex. And we wanted to put people at the centre of it, and I think it was quite early on, Colin and I were discussing it, and the new entrant story kept coming up time and time again. I think what we wanted, we were worried, and we did the first film, so the average age in the first one, they came to farmers. We did have a mixture. We had a couple in their, or 3 in their 30s and 2. So we did have a nice age range. But what we soon realised is that everybody is on a journey with regenerative farm. Even someone like Wild Farms, where you've got Andy Cato, and people will say, oh, well, they've got the answers. If you talk to Andy, he would never say, I've got the answer. Because the same with the cherries, everybody, and Gabe Brown would tell you this, everybody's exploring, because every year, the climate's changing, and it's complex, and they're learning. Like, as I said earlier, we still don't understand this complex thing, which is soil. So we decided, as a way of doing it, if you put young people at the centre of it, then you're going to be showing that their sort of ideas and exploration, and then you could take them to more senior farmers and get them to ask them and get some questions answered, and sort of unravel about their hopes and their dreams. And also, I think you're absolutely right. One of our biggest issues we have here is land access, etc. So one of the examples is that, well, 2 of them actually have got very benevolent, incredible landlords, who believe in regeneration, not only of the soil, but of their businesses and their communities, which is a true sense of regeneration, not just the practices. And they invited them in, and that for us seemed like a really fascinating story to tell as well. So if you've got a lot of our land is owned by some huge landowners in this country, and within that, it would be lovely to see that more land is made available for a very keen up and coming new entrant crowds who are keen for, it may just be a few acres to grow veg, but there is, and I think maybe even more since COVID, where people became discouraged, have questioned their lives more. Do they actually want to be stuck in a city, in an urban environment, or would they like to have that sort of more of a subsistence style living on the land? So I think that's why that was another really, that was a driver for us to have them. But also, the three are wonderful storytellers, and it's really nice to have that younger entity and voice.
Yeah, and I think there's something there just in that relationship of a very large landowner offering some land to a very enthusiastic but otherwise landless individual. There's something there that could be replicated, and it's certainly worth highlighting just for the sort of potential that has, because I imagine it can be done with a very minimal risk and start with a small area and add to. And I think any landowner that has the capacity to just hold space for that and just allow and let people learn, then they become part of the ever expanding journey of learning. As you say, that even people that have been doing it for decades feel like they're still on, they're still adapting and learning and taking it all in. So yeah, there's certainly something in that this offers that I think industrial agriculture, you would struggle to go, I'm just going to take on a couple of acres. So there's so many layers to this, and I enjoy that you've kind of focused on the story of these people, because I haven't seen the film and I don't really know any more than what probably other interested viewers have seen the trailer, etc. But I really get the sense that the motivation for change, it has to come from people. And it has to come from story. It's not going to come necessarily from logic and statistics and figures. It's going to come from that human connection to why do we do anything? And there's something that I think farming as an industry, it might sound very industrial, but regenerative farming, when you get into the stories of people, it becomes a lifestyle. There's something there. And I wondered if you had any thoughts on that, if you feel that this whole idea of regeneration, because it's difficult to put it into boxes, there's so many terms we can call it, but that there's something that connects it all, that feels like it's more of a passion, more of a lifestyle than a industry on so many levels. Do you feel that coming through in the film?
I hope so. I think it's the other thing that struck us so much. So if you go back to David White and his worms, and some of the other earlier farmers, like Martin Lyons particularly, who heads up Nature Friendly Farming Network, when you see them, so I'm taking them because they are of the average age of a farmer in this country, and when they describe how they farmed earlier in their lives, and let's call it conventional, whatever conventional means, but more relying on putting in inputs onto their land, you see that sense of reconnection with farming. And Martin, I went to his farm recently, it's near here in Cambridgeshire, and wow, I mean, the man is a force, tour de force. I don't know if he actually ever sleeps. It was so wonderful. I hadn't been there, that I went in the summer, so I hadn't been for about 2.5 years. But it was, he was showing me new fields that he had created, small meadows. They were in the rotation. He had made, he was doing studies on it, and the organic matter was coming up, and some more life in the soil. Woodlands were buzzing. The birds, he's potty for birds, and he had sort of, the flower, but there were the meadows, and then there were flower strips. So he is doing this incredible thing where he's done all this research. So he's got, a big Cambridgeshire field, and not just having the margins down the side, he's going in the middle as well, because then you've got positive, as they call them, beneficiaries, which is a rather clunky word for a beautiful little insect like a ladybird that can help go into the fields and consume the aphids and do the jobs without him having to use insecticides. So but he's definitely been, even though he works so hard and he's down in government lobbying, etc., he's definitely been regenerated. You can kind of feel it in himself. And he had to go on a massive journey with his dad to sort of he wanted to do this way of farming earlier on. So when you see that, and the same with David White, when you see him smell his soil, touch his soil, talk about the cover crops, look at the wild diversity he's got on his farm, and he does all these really beautiful posts on Twitter and stuff, you get that innate sense of regeneration. With our younger farmers in the film, one of them has gone back to the family farm. So she is seeing her father regenerate himself. And it is very beautiful. And she makes very, very poignant comments about that. And they are in Lincolnshire. And as you, Helen, know, it's, again, like us, it's flat. It's quite harsh on the eye at times. There aren't enough hedgerows at times, and all of those things that we used to have, those patchworks. But yet Andrew is on this journey, and Anna's gone back to the farm, and the two of them they're working together now, and it's very beautiful. But you can again see the way he's quite a quiet man, quite circumspect about it, but you can clearly see it's helped him reconnect with farming and fall in love with it. I mean, I don't think he'd ever not farm, but you feel very quietly but also more importantly, that Anna is enjoying being back on the farm with him, and she wouldn't have done it if he hadn't done what he's doing. So, and then you hear other farmers say, like, there was a really amazing man up in Scotland. We sadly didn't get to go. I really still have to go. It's miles away. He lives on one of the outer isles, and I'm going to get it wrong if I say it. But anyway, I spoke to him, and he had fallen out of love farming in, I think it was Leicestershire, and he went back. In his retirement, he did the holistic management course, the Alan Savey one, and then came out basically saying, this is what I want to do. And when he talked to me, I was like, oh my Lord, and like his regeneration of himself at the age of 72, he'd gone back into farming. I was like, this is insane, it's amazing. And so all of those examples are really beautiful. So that for me.
I love that you're making it such a clear demonstration, a clear feeling that there's something about bringing life back to the land that brings life back to people and to community and hope, and very uplifting. And I don't think that we should knock that. It's a very powerful thing. I notice also through the stories that you represent, they're very diverse in the type of farm that they have. And I'm assuming that was deliberate in what you're representing. But does it teach you anything about what regenerative farming looks like, or what it doesn't look like, and what it can encompass?
Yeah, we did it very deliberately because obviously we're a small island, but we have lots of different farming communities and different climatic influences. So on the west, it's wetter, and you get more of the grazing and the livestock farming. Everything used to be mixed farming, but that's very roughly more livestock on the west. On the east, as I've said before, we're much more arable and vegetables. But obviously there's a bit of both in everything. So we wanted to go into different areas. We did try and find a farmer in Wales and a farmer in Scotland and maybe even Northern Ireland. But we had to go with the farmers in the end that said they were keen to go with us. But we did definitely want 3 different systems. So the hardest one, and I haven't mentioned him yet, but at the moment, environmentally, we're being presented that we should eat less meat or go completely plant-based and plant trees. We have animals in the film, and Ben is a livestock farmer. He has always been a livestock farmer. His dad has farmed cows in Cornwall. His family have been cattle farmers for years. And he is now farming differently from his dad and previous generations. And he's been he rents a piece of land from landowners who are looking for someone like him and his partner, Claudia, to come and farm the land in the way that they wanted it farmed, which is to regenerate the soil, the land, and the community around it. So Ben is on that personal journey, but also what we try and explore without trying to oversimplify it is that these ruminants can play a very, very key role on the land to regenerate the soil and also the biodiversity in his woodlands, etc. Yes, there are lots of voices out there that see this as a bad use of land, and that we're not getting enough protein and out of it. At the moment, you have intensively farmed animals, and cows, particularly in the winter, are always inside. His are outside, mob grazing. They're moved around frequently. They're fed off the hay from his land, etc. So people may see, well, he needs a bit more land farm. There's less livestock. We're going to have less food being produced. But it's all a journey, and we are just trying to show that what is being explored, and it may be part of a more complex system. We may have different forms of protein coming into it, but we just want to show the place of the cow within the regenerative system. He is just cows. He has got a few pigs now as well. So that was a livestock conversation. There is a livestock conversation also when you go to Lincolnshire, because Anna and Andrew, essentially arable farmers, they did have veg for a bit, but the arable farmers at the moment, and they brought in sheep to help with the regeneration. So they're fertilizers. They call them the golden hooves. They're helping turn up the land. They're bringing in, and they are moving them around, whether they're grazing on a cover crop, which is a crop to put in to protect the soil and also fix nitrogen, etc., in between your cycle of, or part of your rotation of all the arable crops they have. And so those sheep are coming in. So you've got them, and then we've got Adrienne nearer us in Cambridgeshire. Now she is on a large arable regenerative farm. And it's almost peri-urban because Cambridge is really, really close by. So again, you kind of got that angle. She's exploring different routes to market. But she is small scale veg. And again, people might criticize us for that, but we shouldn't exclude that, because a lot of people are now, like Sustain, who are an amazing organisation who've been lobbying this for years, sees the place, and there's lots of studies showing that if we had more of these smaller growers growing closer to populations and producing veg that isn't traveled very far and is fresher and having other people working on the land, hopefully not few people feeling we're going backwards, but actually providing people with this wonderful food, but with control of it and not completely annihilating the land as it's being grown. So looking at that's what we've done. And then they go and meet mentors who are more senior in it, and they are doing similar things to them on their land so that they can compare, ask questions, and sort of think about the future and their position in farming. So yeah, it's just giving everyone that. Also there is, the soils are obviously described as well. The different soils are different challenges, the different ways they're trying to boost and enrich their soils. So
fantastic. It sounds that diversity on each individual site is also being looked at that larger scale. And I kind of feel like if anyone wants to critique the sort of choice of going for a small vegetable, peri-urban site, well, I think that you've highlighted it's actually a wonderful solution for the way that we can connect with these very complex problems in our food system. So I absolutely respect and appreciate the inclusion of such a range of different solutions. The more solutions we have, the more diversity there, the more opportunity there is for people to connect in and find that actually I quite fancy being involved in that myself or such. So I think it's fantastic. What you're doing sounds like a wonderful story, a wonderful overview of so many important topics. We've touched on the soil and the health of people and how that's connected in the food, and we've touched on a bit of politics. I wonder if there's any more sort of larger issues or sort of interconnected issues that the film goes into that you might like to mention.
Yeah, it's been a scarily complex subject, which is probably why it's there aren't a lot of these films out there. There are a myriad of films where you look at, whether it's a film to do with food and obesity, etc. But every time we dug into the subject, there was another layer of it. And so we do have Henry Dimbleby, as let's call him. He was the creator of the latest national food strategy, which the government mostly ignored, which is hard. I find this a really hard pill to swallow because millions would have been spent on that 3-year study of our money, our taxpayers' money, and they haven't. Yeah, they've ignored it. So, some of it has been taken on board. But Henry, because of that, has stepped away from being a government advisor. He's written his book and he's in our film, and it's amazing. And he highlights those big issues, but also says, and he at the centre of what he is really our health issues. And so I have alluded to those already, but we do look into that. But we've got to what we ended up doing with the film is there are subjects presented throughout, and what we invite people to do is what we call dig deeper. Now on our website, we are developing at the moment, it's still quite basic, but it's part of what we're calling our impact campaign, and we're sort of fundraising if people want to be involved in this, to develop this further, that we've got these topics. We don't want to reinvent the wheel. We have worked with, now 12 NGOs, but partners who basically helped us with research guidance and fact-finding, etc. And a lot of them, so if it's Soil Association or Sustain or NFFN, they all have amazing campaigns they've developed. And literally the other day we spoke to Guy and Watson back to that one, and his campaign has really gained traction and has actually got to its 100,000, but they're now pushing even more. So we're trying to identify the ones we think are gaining the most traction and would have the most influence on the system change that we would like to see. And so if you go into that, having watched the film, you can then go, oh, I'd like to dig into these subjects a bit further, whether it's soil, climate, farming, food. And so on there, you can then go, I'm a farmer. I'd like to know more. What do I do next? Oh, I could become a member of Nature Friendly Farming Worker. Oh, I'd quite like to do what Ben's doing with the cows, but I don't know where to start. So pasture for Life, are brilliant. And they're doing all these courses and there are online resources and all of that. So we're kind of signposting, and we have collaborated because, again, a lot of the organizations are doing this, but we really believe there's so many of them doing amazing things. We're trying to signpost people to those. But yeah, so I think, there's obviously the complexities of soil, there's the complexities of our health connection, and there's complexities of the policy and government, and then there's the complexity of how we get farmers to transition, and one of the biggest things for me is to get this film seen and discussed outside of our echo chamber. And so I'm desperate for this film. What we are doing with it is doing screenings and then eventizing it. So you see the film, and then there's a panel session. And then afterwards, maybe some celebratory food that's created from food that's sourced locally, hopefully regeneratively, if anyone, that's hard. I know there's no labels, but agroecologically, planet-friendly, whatever you want to call it, locally well-produced food, and have those discussions around it. It will eventually go online, but immediately we want it to be a film that generates discussion. And so we've had so many offers to show it, and some of them we as filmmakers will be there to discuss and present it, and some of our farmers who've been in the film will also be there. But otherwise we're asking organizations to for example, the Sustain has sustainable food places, and they're an amazing, I think they've got 92 places now, and some of those groups have already said they want to share the film, and they will generate an event around it, and they will probably invite people in their local area who either growers. We want farmers really to always be. The other thing that happens is, we do bring this up, is food discussions often happen without farmers in a room. So if anyone shows a film, please have at least one farmer or grower on that panel. So that is one of our biggest asks, is to reconnect back to the people who are multifaceted, unbelievable people that work on our land to produce food for us every day. We'd love farmers to take it seriously enough. It's not techie for farmers, but we'd love farmers to take it seriously enough that they want to show it with other farmers who might be considering or might not, or want to sort of invite them into this arena. Then on top of that, anyone that's interested in food and farming, and it could also be shown in institutional, we're going to take it hopefully into academic scenarios, from agricultural colleges to universities to schools eventually. But and then the other big ask we've had is from corporates. So any corporates out there who want to show the film and generate an event, we really want to talk to people about that. But yeah, so that's the essence of it.
It's fantastic. I really very much applaud the way that you've thought this through, and you are reaching out and connecting and collaborating with all of these different efforts, because there's something in what you're creating. You're not just thinking of it as an on-screen piece, but actually as a tool that assists people in not just understanding, but maybe taking a role, maybe learning something new for themselves. And it can be the start of their journey, and then you're assisting them in many different ways. So that sounds absolutely fantastic. I think congratulations are in order that you've kind of reached this phase, that you are at this cusp of ready to start showings, and it's very exciting. So I have one last question, and it may be the most complex one yet, but in terms of how you feel about the future of soil, do you feel like if you went back to the start of this journey to now, do you feel more concerned or less concerned about our soils?
I was listening to Caroline Lucas the other day talking about if you're an optimist, you sometimes actually don't look into the problems and don't actually call for change, because you see everything is quite rosy. And I would say genuinely I'm an optimist, but I'm a realist, and I do believe in hope, which is the key to change. So I feel there's hope, but I am alarmed at the lack of urgency and speed of change. And I think it's quite emotional. If I look into the people that control our country, world, I think it's pretty terrifying, really. And so I hope that with the rising of these wonderful people that we have seen and filmed with and met, and I meet more and more of them, and I think I genuinely think within any world, most people are good and will want change and will need to see the future. So I'm hoping that people get on the bandwagon more and more and will reach out. But it is right now not happening fast enough.
Yeah, well said. Well, thank you so much. It's been a real pleasure to have this opportunity to talk with you.
Thank you, Helen. Thanks for your time. We really, really appreciate it. And thanks for your support.
And thank you for listening to this episode of We Are Carbon. You can find further details about 6 inches of soil, how to keep up to date with them, and everything that Claire has discussed here through the link in the description. New episodes of this podcast are added every other Tuesday, with extra video content added in between. See the description for more information about this season of We Are Carbon and the additional ways that you can become involved. And let's keep figuring this all out together.